for joining me today. We published the Return of Pirate Nation, our reopening plan, on Monday, and I think all of us feel like we need to get together and discuss it. If you're like me, you have questions, and in some cases some concerns, and I think it's good for us to get together and to share some of that. I can tell you that this fall reopening will be unlike any fall that I can remember in 42 years of a career in higher ed. So if there's some uncertainty in your minds, trust me, there it is in my mind as well. So it'll be unlike any other. I think in large part, some of the differences will be the constraints that we must live under in order to cope with the presence of this virus in our ECU community. And make no mistake, that virus will be present with us. Make no mistake, we will have diagnosed cases of COVID-19 here at ECU. That is a sure thing. How we mitigate and how we cope is what's more under our control. And so we will require masks. If you're in a public space, if you're in a face-to-face meeting on our campus, you will wear a mask. Students will wear masks in the same types of settings. And so this is not a request, it's a requirement. It's a requirement that doesn't derive from enforcement, or the fear of enforcement. It derives from pirate culture. It derives from my desire to protect you. It derives from your desire to protect your colleagues, to protect your students. It's going to derive from the students' increasing awareness of their important responsibility in making sure that we're safe. Those masks will play a key role. We'll stay as distant as we can, 6 feet whenever possible on our campus, in the classroom, and other spaces. So we'll be spread out for sure. There'll be signs that help us with all this. What's the capacity of an elevator, for example? And as you can imagine, it's much smaller than its design capacity, as is the case with our classrooms and other public spaces. So lots of behavioral constraints, lots of expectations, community expectations of one another as we mitigate and as we cope with this virus and its presence amongst us. So we will develop this culture of compliance. We've got I think some very good videography coming out on how to keep distant, on where those masks should be worn. We want to make sure that everybody understands what those behavioral constraints, what those expectations look like out there on our landscape and in our buildings. Also in cleaning. Today I requested videography on how to clean our personal spaces. I'm expected to keep my desk area nice and sanitized, and as you are, and we're going to need the materials to do that and some training perhaps to do that as well. So we've all got some work to do before we can open these classes up on August 10th, and I know we can count on you to do that. I'm really excited, though. I must tell you, it's been a pretty lonely campus. It's a university campus is not a very exciting place when there's no people. And so having people back together, face to face, with our students, with our colleagues, is what's most exciting about this return. The energy that these young people bring to our campus and share with us is something that I think that we all crave. The flip side of that excitement is the uncertainty, as I mentioned, and the sort of what if questions. And I have those questions just like you do. We're going to do the best we can to mitigate and to cope with the presence of this virus. We'll be watching the numbers very, very carefully, and we'll make sure that we understand the trends, and we'll understand that global and national and state local level. We have data agreements with Biden Health. We have data agreements with Pitt County Health. And so we're going to make sure that we're watching this thing very, very carefully. But I also want to remind everybody that there are very few places on the planet that are as well equipped to cope with the virus and its associated disease than right here in Greenville. I mean, we really do have excellent public health professionals right here on our campus, a Brody School of Medicine. We have an excellent student health center. We have one of the largest medical centers in the country here at the Biden Center locally. So I think we're well equipped. And one source of confidence that I have increasingly is the manner in which we treat those who are affected, infected by COVID-19. The treatment has improved so markedly through time. And so we've learned to live with this thing through time. And I think we can apply what we've learned over the last few months as we open up in the fall. So I do believe if we'll wear our masks, and if we'll stay distant, and if we'll avoid those large crowds, and if we'll keep our hands washed, then maybe in fact we got this. I certainly hope so, and but like you, I have questions and concerns. The plan itself that has been published provides a pretty general framework, a little bit of detail there, but there are certainly operational aspects that are still being worked on. Some will become known and slotted at the website in short order. We have 3 documents that we're working on right now. One is an employee-oriented document. Some of those details that you crave will be in there. We have another document intended for students and for their parents, their families. And we have a third document that we're producing for visitors. So some of this culture of compliance that we need to achieve will be expressed in those documents, some of it in the videography that will be posted to the website. So we've still got a lot of work to do, but I think the document that has been published to date provides a pretty good framework, but also provides ample opportunity for questions. And that's why I'm here today. I want to hear from you. I want to listen to you. I want you to pose questions to me, and I'm going to do my best to answer them. I can tell you if I don't have the answer between my ears here today, I will find the answer for you. I will prompt the right people, the experts on our campus, whether it's a question about students or faculty or cleaning or whatever the case might be. So I think what we'll do now is to get to your questions. If you'll pose them, again, I'll do my very best to answer them. I want to remind you that today is our first in the Town Hall series. We'll have a second one on July 1st. If we need more than that, we'll do more than that. So if we don't quite get to your question today, we'll make every effort to get to it on July 1st at 3 o'clock, same time, same place. So if you can start posting your questions, that would be good. There's a little delay between your typing and my reading, so let's go ahead and get started. I have one in my window right now. Here's the question, I'll read it. With the number of COVID-19 infections and hospitalizations trending upward, higher, what was the basis for the determination that it is safe to return to on-campus instruction on August 10th? A fantastic question, and those are exactly the metrics that we've been following. Probably the one that is most troublesome to us is, in fact, the number of hospitalizations that have occurred. And I've been watching this. Probably 6 weeks ago, we were in the neighborhood of 600 hospitalizations statewide. 600. Don't forget, we have 10 million people. And today, that number is about 900. So it's certainly a worrisome, troublesome thing, but in terms of relative or absolute frequency, it's still a relatively small number. I think, in fact, if we do a good job of mitigation in our space, on our campus, with masks and with spacing and with cleanliness, that those numbers are less meaningful for this environment than they would be in general. Thank you for that question. Here's another question. Does public space include outside on campus for requiring a mask? Well, that's a great question. In general, the answer is, especially during, I would say during, peak time between classes, for example, where you do have density, that a mask should be on. So public spaces in general are certainly intended for these internal spaces. But I would also suggest to you, if you can't be at least 6 feet apart outside, that you should have a mask on as well. And so those spaces include outside as well. Perhaps another question. Let's see. I'm sorry, my comment didn't load. I am sending facilities people and housekeeping daily in the buildings and elsewhere without masks. This is quite disturbing with the guidance to wear masks. So I'm wondering why this is happening. Why isn't everyone wearing masks if this is the instruction? So well, a couple things on that. It does vary right now, and it varies by individual choice. And so certainly the people that I've been interacting with, they wear masks. At the entrance to my conference room, there's a table set up with masks and cleaning supplies, and so everybody does that. The key, though, is that this becomes the requirement on July 1. I think that's really what I should say. That right now you'll see some variation in that. I hope it certainly decreases in variation between now and July 1. But July 1, everybody's wearing a mask. And when someone doesn't have a mask, we'll probably approach them with a disposable one and ask them to put it on. So July 1 is our kickoff, and you'll see everybody with masks at that point in time. Our next question. How will we teach face-to-face classes for over 2 hours wearing a mask? How will students be able to hear us and hear them if they have questions? Well, make no mistake, this is going to be a more difficult chore than it is without a mask. There's little doubt that there'll be a comfort issue. There's little doubt in my mind that you might want to take a break during a 2-hour period so that you have some relief from the mask, maybe distance yourself outside or something like that, just so that you readjust to that. I've signed up to teach Geography 1000 in the second block, 8-week block of fall semester, and I've been thinking about this very thing, that I'm going to wear a mask. And I'm doing it. It's going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to have to project myself perhaps a little better than normal. I might have to repeat questions that students might have so that the whole class can hear but it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be convenient, but it's going to be the right thing to do. So, I'll be doing it. You'll be doing it. Some of you will be doing it. And I'm thankful in advance for your commitment to those students and their commitment to you in that classroom setting. So yes, we'll be teaching those long hours with a mask on. Thank you for that question. Next question is, will there be fall sports? Right now, at this moment, the answer is yes. We have scheduled games. I saw the soccer schedule the other day. Women's soccer is scheduled to play games this fall. We've got an exciting schedule for Dowdy-Ficklin Stadium. Now, I just said there's a schedule. Everything's scheduled. We're expecting Marshall University, a historic game, by the way, 50th anniversary of a tragic plane crash that killed all of the Marshall team that day in their trip home from Greenville, North Carolina. And so it's a historic game, August 29th. We'll have a lot of TV national coverage here, but I can't tell you exactly what that's going to be like. I can't tell you that there are going to be 48,000 fans in Dowdy-Ficklin Stadium, because I don't know the answer to that question. I suspect that Governor Roy Cooper will have a lot to say about what kind of gathering sizes that are permitted, what the capacity of a stadium like that might be. I know that there are other chancellors, whether interim or not, who are thinking about the capacity of football stadiums and what might be the case. I have a call scheduled with Chancellor over at NC State to have that kind of discussion. Because we don't know the answer to the question what it might look like in terms of fans. I suspect we'll have TV coverage, but I don't know what we'll have in the stands. I'm hopeful that some of us can certainly attend those sports events. How are large classes, 100 or more, supposed to maintain social distancing? My understanding of how we've scheduled our classes this fall is that we basically put a marker on it. If it's more than 50, it's basically headed online. So my understanding is from that group of administrators and faculty who sort of designed what we'd be doing in the fall, if it's over 50, it's headed online. I do think we've been exploring a few spaces that have very large capacity. Wright Auditorium, I think there are 1,500 seats in that area, so that maybe there would be a few sections that could have larger numbers. But you're absolutely right. The concern for room capacity is everywhere, with faculty, with staff, with students. And in general, what we know is if we're to keep the kind of distancing that we have in mind, and what we have said is 6 feet whenever possible, that the capacity of a typical classroom is reduced by at least 50%. And so, you know, there are very few spaces on our campus that can accommodate 100 students at that kind of spacing. So, you know, whether the capacity of a room is 40% of its design capacity or 50%, it will vary. We have a group we do have a group of professionals, including Angela Anderson, who's now serving acting vice provost, and Dawn Pilgrim Dunn, who does most of our space planning. They're analyzing each and every room, an institutional approach to making sure that we get those designs right. We have templates for seating from an architectural firm that illustrates good seating patterns. So that's an important part of the ingredient for success, this spacing. So good question, and your concern is well placed. Our next question, what do you think the estimated date that employees will return to work? So that's another great question. There'll be a sequence here. I mean, right now, we're all still encouraged to telework as much as possible. And so this return to campus will be staged. It will be relatively gradual. It will be orchestrated in large part by supervisors. And so, you know, I've already been through this with my immediate group. In terms of expectations, many of the cabinet members, I don't need them to be on campus, and I said to them they should continue to telework until further notice. The support staff that I have very locally here in the chancellor's office, we've already worked out our schedule. They're going to continue to telework. I see them basically once a week. They're going to continue to telework certainly until August 1st. And then probably they'll stage a rotational scheme where each one comes in every other day, so that the office is covered after August 1, but certainly at a reduced level. So we're still trying to increase our density very, very gradually. So I don't think there'll be an exact day when everybody returns. Certainly the students return prior to August 10th. But the employees will come back gradually throughout the month of July and into August. We're encouraging teleworking and low density as much as possible. I would expect local offices with their supervisors to work all that detail out. It's the best place to have those details worked out. Let's see. I might have missed it, but is there a date known for the release of those 3 additional documents? I've asked that we have these completed by July 1. I believe that we're very close to finishing the employee version. I think the employee version might be published this week. So that's our goal. It's very close. I've seen a couple of versions of it now, a couple of drafts. As you can imagine, it needs to get, the employee version needs to get to HR, it needs to get to the Office of University Attorney to make sure that we're clear and that we've got the best possible documents. So certainly before July 1 is the goal, and we could see the employee version within a few days. Next question. Will the residence halls be operating under full student capacity? This is a great question, and one that we certainly have pondered locally, but the guidance came from the system. The system has made it clear that residence halls should actually operate at their normal capacity. So in general, what that means is you have a roommate in most cases. Now, we have expanded the number of private rooms, individual rooms, in order to accommodate special need. As you all know, there are vulnerabilities associated with this COVID-19, and so those conditions, as defined by the CDC and others, that could have an influence on vulnerability, are taken into account. And so there's an expanded number of those private settings. But in general, students will have a roommate, and we will treat that room, the 2 roommates, as a household. They'll be treated like a household. They should live together. They're in private space. They don't need to wear a mask. They might do some distancing, but in general, we would encourage them not to share their personal supplies and the like, those kinds of things. But in general, the residence halls will be operating at normal capacity and with all those young people in them. So I'm pretty confident that they'll be fine in those settings and will be quite respectful for the many rules that they're going to have to follow on our campus. Next question, this is a common question. Will fabric masks be distributed to all faculty, staff, and students on campus? So if I read my latest message on this topic, we've purchased a very large quantity of disposable masks, and those will be very widely distributed on our campus. You can expect, if you're in an academic department, you can expect the central office to have a supply of disposable masks. For example, faculty will have access to those to bring to class with them in case a student forgets. We are providing the first fabric mask to each and every employee. So that's the rule we're following. So I guess the answer is yes, but is it an unlimited supply? No. If you're like me, you already have your mask. I wear my mask out and about. My wife, my dear wife, Sarah, made those masks, and I have 5 of them, 1 for each day of the work week, and I'll rotate them. So many already have masks, and if there's an issue with an individual not having a mask, we would certainly want to know it and would accommodate it. So in general, now in addition to masks, I should say, we've also ordered, I think, over 1,000 of the face shields. And I think in those cases where, for example, faculty in the classroom setting or in the laboratory setting wish to have a face shield to go along with their mask, that those are also being purchased and would be provided. I don't think they're going to be provided to each and every one. It would be a waste of time and effort and money. But we will certainly distribute to individuals who want that extra protection. Here's a question. There's a lot of noise in social media regarding housing contracts for students at some UNC system schools. The problem was no refunds for housing should the university close housing again due to COVID. Is ECU planning to do this as well? Well, we've talked about this. We've talked about it at length. The simple answer is we will provide refunds. If we stop serving students in the residence halls and in the dining facilities, they will have a prorated refund, much like we did in the spring, last spring. So this is a risky decision, as you might suspect. I mean, it's a risky decision in the sense that there would be pretty significant impact financially on those sectors should we have to return folks to their homes and go online with our education, remote education again. So it's risky, but we believe that it's the right thing to do. And if we stick out like that in the system, then so be it. I'm glad we'll stick out like it. But we've talked about this at the cabinet level, and we will provide refunds for housing and dining services if we go to closure. I hope we don't, by the way. We're going to take every effort to mitigate with our masks and our distancing, our washing of our hands, to make sure that we mitigate and don't have to do that. Next question. Who will be responsible for enforcing masks? I've already seen posts of students saying they will refuse to wear them. Well, I really don't like that attitude. So I must tell you, these are now regulations. We have interim regulations on face coverings and distancing, social distancing, that have been uploaded and will be shared soon and posted to the website. So those interim regulations put in place the authority to enforce. Now, I'm not into like a lot of enforcement. I think you heard me say that my goal here is that everybody buys into their responsibility to protect and to care for one another. And you know, maybe I'm an idealist, but I think if we say it frequently enough and illustrate it frequently enough before everybody shows up, that we'll get pretty good compliance, a culture of compliance, a community expectation for these behaviors. But in the rare case where somebody is just violating regulation, I mean, we do have recourse to sanctions, and the Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities is I think reworking some of their own documents to make sure that we can deal with this. But I can tell you, when I'm teaching my class at 8 a.m. on Tuesday and Thursday, second gateway block, and the students don't come in my classroom unless they get a mask on. I'm not going in the classroom unless I get a mask on. And ultimately, it's our conscience that will enforce that. But and nobody wants to revert to. I think what we'll see is people with disposable masks correcting the issue. That's what I think we'll see. A very positive reinforcement of the social behaviors that we want. Who will be responsible for enforcing? Did I just do that one? Oh yeah, no, that's the one we just did. Okay, excuse me, I'm old. Regarding cleaning on campus. Cleaning, it's been a topic. Will materials be available to facilitate cleaning? If so, what materials will be available? Who will cleaning supplies be offered to? And how can students, faculty, and staff acquire these tools? Well, good question. That's a lot of operational detail there, and I don't have all the answers for you today, but I have prompted actually yesterday and again this morning for an update on where we are with the procurement of these materials. And as you know, the supply chains are a wee bit disrupted right now. You go to your grocery store and you can't find the wipes that you want. Well, institutions have a little bit better time with the supply chain right now than the retail. So we're working through a couple of channels, the UNC system, our friends over at Biden, and we're hopeful that we'll correct supply chain issues that we are experiencing, like everybody. We certainly do have a set of supplies on hand that will get us started, but we need to make sure that those supply chains are healthy and that we're able to provide those things. The expectation on housekeeping, and they're great ECU employees. They've been trained and retrained. We've used some of this downtime to make sure that they know the high touch areas that are going to need multiple visits daily, and all that, and how to do it, how to do the bathrooms. So we'll increase the frequency of bathroom cleaning. I've reconfirmed that with campus operations just today. We're probably going to be hiring some temporary help in this regard, individuals who will have nothing to do except keep those high-touch places clean, those railings, those doorknobs, and the like. But we are really dependent on the individuals in our community to also assist with that. I have a set of wipes here, and you know, I'll be responsible for making sure my local area is sanitized so that when I use it, you know, it's healthy. I think we'll have these supplies outside of classrooms. Certainly in the academic settings, we'll have them for the units, the departments. The funds are coming from the CARES funding. The state has provided CARES funding that will be applied to these needs. We've sort of set up a distribution set of channels on our campus so that those materials flow from materials management to units on request. And we've identified key points of contact between the units and those supplies. So you can imagine a big warehouse full of stuff, and it flows to campus on an as-need basis. That's basically been put in place, and I'm pleased with the amount of progress that we've been making. Some of these things that you're asking are really great questions, and some of these things we'll put up on the website in one-page summaries and the like. We'll also create some videography. I said today we need some training. The document says we'll do some training, and I was reminded of that today from Senate officers, the faculty Senate officers. And so I think we need some videography on how to keep your area clean. We want students to take a wipe and do their little desktop in the classroom, for example, before they sit. So we have expectations. We want to illustrate that both with our signage and with our videography. Those will all be uploaded to the website and linked. Let's see, what's our next? What number of active cases on campus, this is the million-dollar question. What number of active cases on campus will cause the university to shut down completely again? Is there a number that ECU has in mind? It's a great question. The answer is no. We do not have a number in mind right now. In fact, when I've queried President Roper and the UNC system on this, it's pretty clear that particular decision and the guidance behind it will be a system level decision and guidance, much like it was in the spring. And so I don't think necessarily ECU will be left to its own devices to actually have that criterion, but you understand as well as I do that we have to monitor the metrics and pay careful attention to the trends. We're going to have COVID cases. I mentioned that in the opening. We're living with this virus, and I think we're learning how to live with this virus, both in terms of our preventive behavior, but also in our ability to treat. And so I'm much more confident today than I was, 3 months ago, when I would have said, well, we're not even going to try to reopen. So I think we're in a pretty good place, but I can't tell you that we have a magic number where we pull the plug and say, okay, we tried our best. We did. We gave it a great college try, but it's not working out. And so let's get people off campus again. And that could happen. I don't want it to happen. You don't want it to happen. And we're going to give it our best shot. Next question. These are great questions, by the way, and they're the same questions that I have. It's validating for me as well as you, I hope. How will ECU try to prevent employees from coming to work sick? How will ECU try to prevent employees from coming to work sick? Well, if we're talking about COVID-19, so I'm presuming we're going to talk about COVID-19. I mean, that we do have authority in this realm, right? It's an infectious disease. We do have a Pitt County Public Health Director who has authority to force isolation, to force quarantine. Now, we're in conversation with public health to deputize 2 individuals on our campus. No need to name them here, who can assist with that work. And so, if we've got a positive test, they're not coming. If there are symptoms, I think we have to be a little more careful. I think the responsible thing to do is, of course, if you have symptoms, is to talk to your supervisor about that. And we don't want people coming, just like the flu. We don't want you coming to work if you've got the symptoms. And so, some of this has to play out just the way it would with the flu. But if we're talking about a diagnosed case, they're not coming to work. We have the authority to keep them from work. Is there a concern and a plan in place for a second wave of COVID-19? And is the school prepared for the possibility that Governor Cooper may send the state back into a stay-at-home order? Well, I think the simple answer is yes. We realize that whether it's a second wave or a second plateau, I don't know, the shape of these curves are strange these days, but that it's possible that we would, that the world tries to reopen here and it's not in our best interest, and that we get a gubernatorial order, an executive order to go back home. That's a possibility. And in many ways, that's disastrous for our institution, for our students, for the mission, for accomplishing the mission. We, of course, have sort of partitioned our year a little differently, and at great consternation to many, so that we have these 8-week blocks, we've called them, so that we have a little more flexibility in this regard than a 15-week semester provides. So we're a little more nimble this year. We're probably a little more flexible this year. We already have a lot more online opportunity than we did a year ago in that fall semester. We have a lot more hybrid activity. My course that I'm teaching is hybrid. So we're certainly, I think, better positioned to plan for a second wave. So we start early, August 10th. We end early before Thanksgiving. We start a little later in the spring, so we've left that period. It's probably a month and a half, if I did my arithmetic right, a month and a half where those students aren't with us, so that we can monitor perhaps. The timing on a second wave is not well known. I've been watching the Southern Hemisphere because, as you're well aware, It's winter down there, and so we're thinking about what's going on in Brazil, for example. So I think we're aware that a second wave is a possibility. I think we're also very, very aware that if we mitigate well and prepare well, that we might, and by that time, January, I saw Fauci on, you see this fellow Fauci on TV a lot, I do too. He says there's a vaccine by January, so I'm counting, I'm banking on it. Great question. How will dining halls be approached with all of the students? So, yeah, you know, they're very well planned. In fact, I would say dining on our campus has been really well planned. Some things have been shut down. There'll be a lot more takeout. I don't remember what the system is that delivers food, but they've got an agreement with, it's not Uber, what is it? Yeah, something DoorDash or something. You know, so we have that set up. The Croatan will be a center of pickup for meals. The West End Dining Hall, Todd Dining Hall are being socially distanced, right? And you won't have the buffet style. All of that is going to be gone. And so distancing within the halls, takeout is more prevalent. And between these accommodations and changes, we expect to be able to accommodate the students. Within the student center, I know at least one of the ballrooms is going to be set up for a distanced approach to eating and dining. So that's, I think, a great solution. So they've given a lot of thought, and I'm thankful to Vice Chancellor Hardy and Bill McCartney and others who have given that a tremendous amount of planning as we approach August 10th. What is the plan for faculty who choose not to come to campus? And do you acknowledge that any requirement of health info presents privacy concerns? Oh yeah, absolutely. So the way I've looked at this is if we're to err, we will err on the side of flexibility and accommodation. Certainly for those who require a medical accommodation, we have the typical ADA approach, and you should follow that, and your privacy will obviously be protected. You do not have to reveal medical conditions to your supervisor in order to request an accommodation like teaching online as opposed to face-to-face. And we've communicated this pretty clearly to the deans, and I'm very hopeful that that message is getting very clearly communicated to, for example, the chairs and the directors who are responsible for scheduling. The faculty who want accommodation, I think in almost all cases will get it, and we would certainly want to hear about those cases where it has been denied. So my hope is that that individual requests, individual preferences can be honored while we still provide enough face-to-face schedule on our campus that makes sense out of bringing students back to campus. And so, you know, what I wouldn't want to see frequently is a first-year student, for example, with the majority of classes being online. I think those things should be avoided. We can do that through advising. I also know that some faculty are quite willing. I'll teach face-to-face the second block of that fall semester. Looking forward to it. I'm excited about it. And so I think some faculty are excited to get back in the classroom, and we want those folks to take advantage of that. And if somebody doesn't want to be face-to-face, I'm hopeful that we can juggle some of that. And in some cases, we may have to change a course section from face-to-face to online. So our intent is to be very, very flexible on this and accommodating. And my hope is that we can do this. I would love to be able to say to the world that at the end of the day, when all the shuffling is done over the next week or so, when all the shuffling is done, that at least a majority of our normal sections or organized sections, lectures and the like, that a majority of those would be in fact face-to-face. And so if that means 51%, I don't know, but it's certainly in the spirit of bringing students back to Greenville that we have a good number of face-to-face courses to offer. Next question. Why don't we have mandatory testing for all members of the ECU community? This is another topic that has been widely discussed, and I've heard from a lot of smart people from a lot of our sister institutions in the UNC system. As you might know, President Roper's a former head of the Centers for Disease Control, and he's got a pretty good handle on these things. I think what we have come to realize is that it's probably a huge waste of money to have everybody tested, and then they do their thing. So we are very interested in what the prevalence of this disease is, and we do have a testing protocol being developed on our campus. And if you want to volunteer to be tested once every couple of weeks, you should let let's see, the PI for this is Suzanne Lee over in the Department of Public Health within the Brody School of Medicine. And I'm sure we'll be recruiting subjects for this examination of prevalence of infection, COVID-19, through time, so that we have a base level and we know what the trend is. And that sample of individuals will be examined through time, and we'll be able to help us identify what the trends are. There are a few categories of individuals who have mandatory testing, a few categories. Student athletes are all being tested. They can't participate unless they're tested. So we've had a large number of student athletes already tested, and we had another 80 tested, I think, yesterday. We have encouraged students to be tested before they return, for their own peace of mind, if nothing else. But I do believe that mandatory testing is not been adopted widely and not at all in the UNC system. So we're going with a non-mandatory approach to testing. There'll be lots of testing. We will test symptoms. We will have this one study that I mentioned for voluntary sampling of testing, surveillance testing, I call it, through time, so that we can keep track of what's going on. Here's our next questions. In the videos to prepare for fall, if instructors are expected to wear masks for that long and project to a classroom, could the CSDI department be included in preparation? Could there be a how-to video with advice on speaking, diction in a way to protect the voice? Well, that's an interesting question. I hadn't thought about it, but we do have, an excellent department over in Allied Health, CSDI, that deals with this. We also have a speech communications center that might be helpful in this regard. So I do think there are some university resources. So not a bad idea, and we'll certainly look into that as a part of the videography programming that we want. Most of it's been designed to think about spacing and wearing masks, not inside the instructional setting. So that's a great question. We'll look into that. Are you working with the city to require masks in community spaces? Oh, interesting question. So that topic, I mean, I can tell you the conversations have taken place, but from what I can tell, the elected officials aren't inclined to require masks. And that could change. I mean, I think some of you have already indicated that, there's a future out there that might not be as bright as I'm painting it here for you today. But in general, we've had that conversation. It's not on the immediate horizon. So the elected officials that I'm listening to certainly encourage it, but they are not in a place where they're requiring it. I think in some cases the private sector leads us on this, right? I think some of the private sector, the stores and like, they seem to have a better attitude towards mandating. If I was emperor, I'd probably say, yeah, you're wearing masks, but I'm not. Will there be a quarantine area for students living in the residence halls should they test positive for the virus? Yes, we put an RFP out a week or two ago. They will be housed in one of these nearby housing complexes just off campus. And I don't think we finalized that deal, but we have space reserved for quarantining. It will be limited. It'll be limited. I do think, as you understand, if the volume's so large that the capacity is overrun, then we probably are going to go online again. But so the answer is yes. And when students or anybody test positive, that becomes an official part of the Department of Public Health in Pitt County. It's recorded, it's sent to the state. We will get that information in aggregate form here, but those individuals will be more or less forced to quarantine. If students self-report not feeling well, will some office follow up to make sure that they quarantine, and will there be a contact tracing with them? So let me start on the end of that question. Most of the contact tracing will be executed through Pitt County Public Health. Now the good news is we're developing this memorandum of understanding and agreement with them so that they're employing a large number of interns from ECU in order to assist with tracing. And they're not going to be doing the basic investigation. I guess there are a couple of levels in this sequence of information. They're investigators and tracers. And so they will have been educated and trained on the official approaches and employed there in Pitt County Public Health to do some of that work. And I can tell you that Pitt County Public Health is very pleased to have the assistance. If students aren't feeling well and actually self-report, they will be instructed to contact student health services. And yes, there will be follow-up. And we care about these students, and so there'll be a follow-up with them. There'll be additional questions, and there'll be some advice for them to seek the kind of medical attention that they might need. How do you anticipate events will happen on campus? This could be from large-scale events to smaller club meetings. I think large-scale events won't take place in the fall. I mean, some of the large-scale events that we actually, as a university, sponsor won't take place, not face-to-face. We'll still celebrate accomplishment. We will still honor individuals, but we won't do it in large gatherings. We mentioned that class sizes, if they're over 50, they're basically going online. So I don't know if 50 is a magic number. Right now, you know what the rules are, right? From executive order. Indoors it's 10, and outdoors it's 25. And so, we're going to live with the gubernatorial rules, and I do not expect large-scale events on our campus. I would like to think that we would do a higher frequency of small-scale events for our students, because we want them engaged and we want them to feel part of a community. And so I think Vice Chancellor Hardy and her teams are thinking about that very clearly, and putting plans together for that. So the smaller club events, smaller scale events will take place. We would encourage the use of these platforms, just like we're using today, to do some of that. I mean, in general, we're trying to mitigate, and so in general, the less face-to-face stuff we have, the better. So we'll be doing very little large-scale event stuff in the fall. If one person in a class tests positive for the virus, would the whole class and the instructor need to quarantine for 14 days? Also, is there any mandate to get tested if one shows the classic symptoms? So there is no mandate to get tested, but we would encourage testing. We would definitely encourage testing. Would a whole class be forced to quarantine? I think the answer to that is no. I think the ingredients to mitigation are also part of that answer. I mean, you have a class that is relatively distant from one another. You have a class that is wearing masks and is relatively well protected from the individual. Now, I would want to know, who's around that individual. So the tracing effect would include, who, and this is a good point. My class, when I teach in the fall, will have assigned seating. And we're not used to that kind of thing. But I really believe that instructors who are with us today should really do this, right? That there is assigned seating so that if somebody does test positive, that we can actually know the immediate buffer. So the way I look at this is this. Contact is a spatial concept, but it's also a temporal contact. There's a time space to this. So a significant contact is within 6 feet, but it's also in excess of 10 minutes. So the occasional passing of individuals really isn't a significant event in this. It just isn't in terms of transmission. And so all of the research suggests. Now, if you have a classroom and you have an individual and that individual is within about 6 feet of other individuals, we want to know who those individuals are, and those tracers would make a phone call and so there could in fact be quarantining there in that particular case. So the answer is case to case, and it's possible that some subset would be quarantined. That's a possibility. Should office hours be conducted online as opposed to face-to-face? Yes, I think that's a great point. And I think that's in the spirit of what we're trying to do, mitigation. We want you to have your office hours. We want you to have them during those scheduled periods. I'm going to have my office hours. And, I think it's smart, right? And whether you use Teams or whatever platform you're going to use, the answer is yes. We're closing in on our 4 o'clock. We're going to keep answering the questions that remain in the queue, but then I'll make sure that we get back together on July 1st so that you can ask those additional questions. So, do we have any other questions? All right. So here's our next question. Are you planning to provide any type of additional support for the ECU community regarding the compounded impact of COVID-19 and racial unrest in America right now? Ooh, the intersection of these two major things is profound. And I certainly have some really smart people helping me to think through this particular issue. I mean, and the intersection of those two powerful forces is just, and you and I all know that what comes back to Greenville and ECU in particular, what comes back here is a considerable amount of COVID-19 potential, but also a good bit of unrest, and rightfully so. And so, I get questions like, well, you're going to let them protest? And I say, yeah, of course I'm going to let them protest. I'll be out there marching with them. Not as a chancellor, by the way, but as a private individual. Okay, is this our last question? One more. Are you okay and leadership team holding up okay? Oh, thank you for your empathy. I really do appreciate it. Are you and your leadership team holding up okay? I think the answer is yes. Like you, I have the same bit of a, good days, bad days, up and down. And some days I think we got this beat, and other days I think, good Lord, what are we doing? So the same feelings that you have, I have, and but we're going to do our very best. That's what I'm committed to, and that's what I want you to be committed to, that we are going to do our very, very best to open up here in the fall, take care of one another, and that if we're careful enough, that is full of care enough, that we will actually have a successful fall semester, and we'll look back at it and we'll thank one another for being so respectful of one another and our health. Yeah, there are long hours, so that's all good. That's all good. I'm here to serve you. I hope you know that. So I want to thank you for joining me this afternoon. The questions have been spot on and just very, very important for us to share. Sharing these answers widely and together is very, very important. Some of these answers I realize have to be formalized and presented to the website so that others can see them. I'm well aware of that. I also know that that we can't over communicate right now. So and you have my email address. It's mitchelsonr@ecu.edu. And if you have additional questions or concerns, you know that you can prompt me, and you know that I will respond. And so feel free. The door's open in that regard. I want to thank you for joining me. I want to thank you for your commitment to our students and to making sure that when we bring them back here for classes on August 10th, that we do our very, very best to give them a wonderful learning experience. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You're great pirates, and I appreciate you. Have a good day.